and our CART interpreter, Bridget, for being with us today. I also want to share a few Zoom webinar features before we get started. All right, so I just want to draw your attention to the Zoom toolbar below. At the moment, you may notice that you cannot unmute or chat just to help keep focused throughout the presentation. However, there are other ways to interact. So in addition to chat, there's the Q&A icon and the closed captioning transcript icon. Chat will be disabled for the presentation. However, if you click on the Q&A icon for questions, we will be answering those at the end of the presentation. And I would ask that you please make sure that all your questions go into the Q&A rather than the chat, just to help us track them at the end and make sure we can answer those as time allows. Also, if you have any technical issues, let's say you're not able to open up a document that we link, you can put that in Q&A as well, and then our folks on the back end will help to troubleshoot that. The closed captioning transcript, you can select show subtitles or view full transcript if you want to use that. And then you'll notice 3 vertical bars in between the presentation and the speaker. You can just slide that bar side to side to adjust your presenter window. As you just heard a moment ago, we are recording this session. It will be on the website within a week or so. We want to get it on within a week, so I'd say within the next 5 days. Materials are also on the website. If we run into any tech issues with our presenters, let's just say both of them, for whatever reason, lost internet access, we'll try to reach them on the back for 5 minutes. And then if we can't get a hold of them, we'll re-record the session at another time and then post that on the site in addition to their materials. And then finally, after the session, there is a survey. We would appreciate it tremendously if you complete that. We are all lean and continuous improvement practitioners, and we're not doing our job well if we're not working on fixing anything that can be fixed, right? So you're the voice of the customer, and we want to hear your voice. So please do that survey if you can. And then now let's get into it. I want to take time to introduce our speakers of the hour, Bonnie Jacobson and Jonathan Sears. So Bonnie has been serving as the Lean Transformation Officer at California Department of Public Health for 2 years. She's a Lean Master Instructor with over 13 years of experience applying and teaching Lean in the healthcare and public health settings. Her objective at CDPH is to turn the department into an organization of 4,500 problem solvers who are best at getting better. Jonathan Sears is a senior lean specialist with the California Department of Public Health, a position he's held since December 2022. As a senior lean specialist, he and his lean transformation section colleagues support CDPH's mission and strategic plan to advance the health and well-being of California's diverse people and communities by building and maintaining a proactive culture of continuous improvement, engaging staff at all levels, and leveraging data and technology to help the department become an organization of problem solvers. Jonathan holds an MPH and a BA from the University of Vermont. And now I will hand it over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Talia. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I know everyone's so busy with important work, and so I really appreciate that you would carve out time to join us. What Jonathan and I are going to share with you over the course of the next hour is the story of our lean transformation journey at CDPH. And I'll begin by giving you a little bit of a background, sort of the genesis of the lean transformation and some of the foundational pieces that we built before we got started. So the original idea for engaging in lean transformation at CDPH really is the brainchild of Dr. Tomas Aragon, who's the director of CDPH. He's been the director since January of 2021. And he was introduced to lean when he was the director of the San Francisco Department of Public Health. So he brought all of that lean leadership with him. He's a fantastic lean leader into his role as director for CDPH. And he was very much inspired by Dr. Monica Sharma, and you can read a little bit about her at the website that's mentioned here on the slide. She sort of supports and puts forward an idea of radical transformation leadership, and you can see in the description here that there are some pieces that resonate really strongly with those of us who have been working in lean for a long time. Ideas of humility and equity, And she supports a concept of universal values. And universal values are values that apply to everyone, everywhere, leaving no one behind, including your worst enemy. And this is a terrific place to start when you're going to be working in equity, health disparities, and those issues that are really the focus of a lot of what we do at CDPH. Next slide, please. Another foundational piece that came up early on was back in September of 2022, Governor Newsom issued an executive order. And the executive order is long, and I only could show you one small piece of it on this slide. But he was very careful in this order to be specific about what his requirements were going to be in terms of equity and health disparities moving forward. So under the order, we are directed at CDPH to embed policies and practices in our strategic plans in order to advance equity and opportunity and to address disparities in healthcare access and outcomes. So another key brick in deciding the direction, the path that we were going to take. Next slide, please. And then the third important piece that I want to call out to you, these are sort of the big themes, is that the state of California made available through a program called the Future of Public Health some historic funding to allow for the growth and development of the department and for attention to be paid to in specific to the areas that are mentioned here on the slide, to developing the workforce, to strengthening emergency preparedness and response, looking at IT, community partnerships, addressing health disparities, all of this really coming out of the things that we learned through the COVID pandemic. So the creation of the Future Public Health Program and this historical amount of funding was another really important element that allowed for the lean transformation to start to crystallize and begin to take form. Next slide, please. So prompted by those things, Dr. Aragon, together with his team, his directorate, built what we are looking at here now, which is the strategic map for the organization. Where does he want CDPH to go? What's the vision for the organization? And then you can also see on the slide what's the mission for the organization. And everything we do in the lean transformation is very much in support of the vision and the mission. And you'll see some additional graphics and communication devices that are developed to make that very clear to the people who work at CDPH. You'll also notice that the map demonstrates a bit of a path, and there are some key milestones on the path. Becoming a learning organization, that's the lean transformation, developing our people, tackling public health challenges. And you'll see that woven into that is the mention of equity in a couple of places. And again, a real focus right from the very beginning on lean leader philosophies and these lean core values of respect for people and continuous improvement. It starts here in the strategic map, which is something that all the staff at CDPH have access to. And then you'll see it repeated and reinforced over and over in the next few slides, which was really how we started to communicate to the organization what the lean transformation really meant. Next slide, please. This is another key building block, was we started establishing something that we refer to as the CDPH way. In our first year, after engaging in a Hoshin strategy with the organization, one of the key strategic priorities that came out of that Hoshin was becoming the best at getting better. That's the continuous improvement work that we're doing. And you can see on this slide another communication device that we use with CDPH to help the people who work there, and there are about 4,500 folks who work at CDPH, understand what does that really mean to become the best at getting better. It means addressing these three key objectives: becoming a learning, healing, impactful organization, developing our people. And those of us who work in lean know that developing people is it's integral to lean. We're always working on developing others. And then tackling the key public health challenges. On the right, you can see the theory of change management and sort of how these different transformational areas overlap and the Venn diagram of those, if we're going to transform communities, transform the teams and collaboratives that we engage in, transform the relationships that we have at work, the Venn diagram there overlaps in leadership philosophies and behaviors, and more specifically, lean leadership philosophies and behaviors, which Dr. Aragon lives and the directorate lives, and now we're trying to teach to all the leaders within CDPH. Next slide, please. Are you with me? Next slide. I don't know if I said that clearly. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here. I'm looking at the Lean True North Compass slide. Is that the one?
I'm not looking at that.
Oh.
Now I am. Okay, great. I was like, I'd like to. There it is. Okay, perfect. So one of the, again, another key communication device that we developed to share with folks in the department, because really one of the first things we had to attend to was letting everyone at CDPH know what lean transformation meant. A lot of people were not familiar with lean, or if they had known anything about lean, it was very cursory. And the things that they knew were mostly tools and methods. You know, they knew how to process map, or maybe they'd heard of the 8 wastes or 5 whys. Those were things that were known. But the other part of lean, the culture part, the leadership part, the values, the behaviors, that was something that was very new and still remains quite new in many areas. So we wanted to continue to reinforce that. So the leadership designed this True North Compass, which is seen in many places throughout CDPH, especially on all of our link checking boards. Our Hoshin link checking, which you'll get a peek at in a little while, has this True North Compass on it. And again, for those of us who've worked in lean in a while, you'll recognize a lot of familiar terms there. The very foundation of the compass, respect for people and continuous improvement. We all know that these are pillars of the lean management system. And then in addition to those, underneath, you see a little more detailed. What does that mean? Well, they're talking about challenge, go and see, Kaizen, teamwork. These were all sort of new ideas to the folks at CDPH. The layer above that are some of the guiding principles that we know from the Shingo model. And this is where Dr. Aragon in his design really started to layer in Shingo principles right from the very beginning. People didn't know when they saw the compass that those were in fact the guiding principles, but we're starting to share that, and the staff are starting to engage with that idea that this is all part of what it means to be a lean enterprise, is to behave in this way and to act in this way. Layered above that, the areas of focus, equity, of course, right there, first thing on the left, workforce development, decision intelligence. These are more what we would call vertical value streams, and we'll talk about that in a second, that are at play. And then all of that, of course, working in support of advancing the mission and the vision of the organization, which you saw on the strategic map as well. So hopefully you see the through line there of all of these different methods of communication and visual models that were created to help people understand what we meant by lean transformation. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we started to think about, okay, well, we're starting to build all these visuals. We're helping people understand what lean transformation might mean. How are we going to apply it? And so we, through the Hoshin that I mentioned earlier, which you'll get a little more detail on in a moment, the leadership identified 3 key strategic priorities initially, and then a few have been added over time. The first was equity and anti-racism. And that really began more as a homegrown effort. So the first steps of that A3, and you'll hear more about that from Jonathan in a moment, were really focused on internal to the organization. Let's heal what is in need of healing internal to CDPH. And once we've healed ourselves, we'll be positioned better to heal others. So that was an initial focus of the equity, anti-racism, trauma-informed. Developing people, workforce development, that's another strategic priority from Hoshin. And then performance improvement, which we now call continuous improvement, because we thought that was a more appropriate term, in that it's never ending, and that we want to improve everything. So those are the three strategic priorities, and we applied them in 2 ways. Sort of vertically, as I mentioned before, which is to say in ways that affect all areas of the organization, something that touches everyone. And then there are also horizontal value streams. These are more of the programmatic or center specific value streams. So there's work that's done on things like the hiring process, which affects everyone, equity throughout the department, IT, that affects everyone, the developing the workforce in terms of allowing people to get the skills and the training that they need, that affects the entire department. Those are the more of the vertical value streams you work on. And then there are horizontal value streams that we have at play, things like budgeting, contracts, regulatory packages. We do work with the Center for Healthcare Quality on specific areas that they have to attend to. One that we've been working on quite a bit is long-term care complaints that come from long-term care facilities. This is where we're getting into more of the traditional lean value stream of like following a process from beginning to end and finding the customer in that process. So there's a lot of that work that's happening too, along with these more overarching department-wide efforts. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that next. So with that, I will hand the microphone over to Jonathan, and he can tell you a little bit more about these specifics.
Thank you, Bonnie. So as Bonnie described, if you can go to the next slide, please. So as Bonnie described, we're early on in this lean transformation journey. So our early lean work at CDPH is focused on these types of strategic initiatives that support CDPH's transition to become a healing and learning organization equipped to solve the complex public health challenges we're facing within public health. So over this next section, over these next few slides, I'm actually going to talk through the strategic work, or those strategic initiatives and vertical value streams that Bonnie just spoke to that are occurring across CDPH. And we're going to call out how we're leveraging lean structures and methods such as Hoshin strategic planning and deployment, value stream mapping and improvement workshops, and structures like linked checking to drive this continuous improvement work. We're also going to call out how these lean structures interface with improving health equity for Californians with this improvement work as well. So these strategic A3s are the vertical value streams described on that previous slide by Bonnie. And we're also working on those horizontal value streams, which are more of like the more common lean approach of following that process over each process step and looking at the different time and waste and so forth. So to stay organized with these strategic initiatives for CDPH, we're using A3 methodology and linked checking. So as a quick refresher for those of you who don't, or for those of you who know A3s, or as a quick overview for those who don't, an A3 is a problem-solving structure and methodology, and it can be broken down into three main areas. So the first part of A3s is to use a standardized template that supports visual management, communication of problem solving across the organization. The second main area within A3s is to use a structured problem solving process that centers problem solvers on understanding your problem deeply, breaking it down using data, understanding the root causes of the problem before you jump to solutions. And then using what we call plan, do, study, act cycles, or PDSA cycles to drive and track improvement. And then the final component of our A3 methodology that we're using is a process that we call catchball. So catchball is a process of sharing your problem with key staff and stakeholders in a way that you can gather input, feedback, and receive coaching to improve your problem-solving process over time. So that covers A3. We're also using what we call linked checking. So linked checking has been integral to our strategic A3 work and strategic improvement work so far at CDPH. And it's a structure that allows us to communicate, align, and make visible the improvement work that's currently being done at CDPH and aligns improvement work up, down, and across our organization. You go to next slide, please. Thank you. So as you all know, a key tenet of lean is respect for people. And a key part of respect for people at CDPH is to develop our staff as leaders and to build their capacity and competencies to drive continuous public health improvement. So our first strategic A3 is developing our people at CDPH. This is a collaborative effort between the Office of Professional Development, Human Resources Division, and the Director's Office within CDPH. The target for this vertical value stream improvement work is to develop the public health competencies of CDPH staff across 9 public health domains and ensure staff have clear career paths to further their development over time. So for those 9 public health domains, domain 4 is specifically and solely focused on developing and equipping CDPH staff and managers on health equity principles and practices so that they're equipped to improve how we address health inequities across California within our public health work here. Next slide. The second strategic A3, and this is, again, one of our vertical value streams, is becoming a learning organization through CDPH's lean transformation. So this A3 is focused on developing our staff as problem solvers and to embody lean leadership principles. Our vision is that CDPH consists of 4,500 problem solvers driving continuous improvement to improve the health and well-being of our customer, and our customer being the people and communities of California. One powerful element of this vision of 4,500 problem solvers is that if each CDPH staff member can bring their unique perspective to call out the challenges that we face as an organization and within our processes, our services, and within our work as a public health department, then we'll be that much better able to develop better, more sustainable improvements that bring more value for our customer. So this process of enabling all staff to be our problem identifiers and solvers can support improvements that are centered or that focus on improving health equity as well with our work. So and what that means is if you can get your staff and our staff across CDPH to be directly engaged with problem solving on a daily basis and feel empowered and enabled to do so, those who are working closest with our customer can call out the specific needs to better support a more equitable population health outcomes across California. You go next slide. Thank you. Another strategic area, and this is going to be one that's going to be in development in our future for our lean improvement work, is on building CDPH's capacity to respond to and mitigate the health effects of climate change on Californians. So this is a great flow diagram that shows the relationship between climate change and the effects it has on health risk for folks. So as we know, and as the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated, the effects of climate change aren't going to be felt equally across all people and communities. So communities who have been or are marginalized or experience structural racism are likely to face a disproportionate impact of climate change effects on their health. So an important way for CDPH to respond to this driver of health inequities is to develop strategies and partnerships that build community and organizational resiliency and respond to climate change impact. So we're expecting to leverage lean improvement structures and methods and principles, as well as management methods, to strengthen CDPH's resilience, capacity, and ability to respond to health impacts due to climate change effects here. Next slide. Another major area of focus in one of our vertical value streams and strategic A3s within CDPH and for our lean work is to become a healing organization. And what that means is that we'd like to become a healing organization that embodies equity, anti-racism, and trauma responsiveness. This is one of our current strategic A3s that we call the Heart A3. We're using lean improvement tools, management philosophies, and problem solving, such as that A3 process I described, PDSA cycles, and others to advance this important work. And we're viewing this hard work as having multiple phases. The first is to look internal and how we become a healing organization. So we'd like to, we're working to evaluate and embed healing, anti-racism, trauma-informed, and health equity principles and practices into our organization, especially looking at the policies, procedures, and our culture, and how that interplays with becoming that healing organization. In future phases, after we're looking internally, we're going to be working to apply these same principles and practices with a view of improving population health outcomes and reducing health inequities. Next slide. Thank you. And as mentioned in that last slide, the target of the HEART A3 is to embed these practices and principles into our organization. So CDPH and other public health organizations and partners, it's been a highly traumatic past few years with the COVID-19 pandemic and multiple other public health emergencies that have required the workforce and all of our partners and stakeholders we work with to work long hours, face severe burnout, and manage work to stand up new emergency services and resources while still working to manage and continue our normal public health operations. So this focus on, so that somewhat explains this focus on healing internally and with our partners as a first step for this HEART A3 work. Next slide. And the last thing I'll speak to for the HEART A3 is that CDPH will be partnering with the Othering and Belonging Institute at the University of California at Berkeley. So these types of partnerships support how we build an organization and drive improvement efforts within and without CDPH in a way that ensures all people belong. Belonging is a key driver of health equity in ensuring that we're able to build those connections that support demarginalization of people and communities will be key in improving health inequities and disparities across California. Next slide. In the final strategic A3 or vertical value stream that we're focused on currently that we'll be sharing today is within the Human Resources Division, and we have the Human Resources Division Hiring Initiative. So this is a multi-pronged approach to filling positions within CDPH while we're ensuring that we're hiring and developing a workforce that represents the diverse people and communities of California. So there's that equity lens as a part of this important work. The recent Future of Public Health funding that Bonnie spoke to early on in our presentation today, that's a great funding package made available to CDPH. It's going to help build and bolster our services. But as you all know, funding's one thing, but hiring and filling positions is another. So we've been employing multiple lean practices and methods, such as mapping our values, our hiring value stream, running concerted improvement workshops, and leveraging visual management, data, and linked checking to reduce our average lead time for our hiring at CDPH. And we're also using a lean lens to ensure that our recruitment, hiring, and retention practices and processes at CDPH allow us to hire and develop a workforce that does represent the diversity of California. So with this strategic A3s that I just spoke to, we're really driving both rapid, incremental, and long-term continuous improvement in all of these major areas. We're working to align and develop and enable our staff to drive improvement in these areas using these types of lean methods, principles, and concepts that we're educating them to. And we're looking at how to embed health equity within all of our strategic work so that we can continue the work across CDPH to reduce health inequities across the state. So I'm going to hand it back to Bonnie to present a bit more on some of the lean concepts that we've been using to drive continuous improvement and develop our people within CDPH. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Thanks, Jonathan. So for those of you in the group that are watching the talk, some of this is going to be review for you, but I do think it's important to call out specifically some of the lean concepts that we are applying to the work right now that are what advanced practitioners might consider basic concepts, but that are so essential in order to lay the right foundation, and are some of the areas where we find we get the most challenge in working with CDPH and sort of steering them in the direction of being a lean organization. Next slide, please. So again, those of you who've worked in lean before, you know the 8 wastes. Maybe you originally heard of them as the 7 wastes, and now they're the 8 wastes. At CDPH, we use the acronym downtime. There are some other acronyms out there, but this was actually the acronym that CDPH was using before I arrived, and I didn't want to make yet another change. So I said, okay, well, we'll go with downtime. People already have some familiarity with it. And so we use this in all of our improvement work to identify, the wastes and areas for opportunity, and how we can change the value added, non-value added ratio when we're looking at things from a value stream mapping perspective. One thing that I've observed in using this tool is that not everyone responds in a positive way to the word waste when it's applied to the work that they do. And so we noticed very quickly that became that people had a little bit of an allergic reaction to that. They're like, wait a minute, what are you saying about waste? And that I'm wasting my time, that this is a waste, what we're doing. And I had encountered that type of reaction before in work that I'd done in the past. So we've really tried instead to ask people, well, how does it feel when things like this happen? How does it feel when you're made to wait? How does it feel when work is not done correctly the first time, or you have to go back and do something again because of a mistake? How does it feel when things are more complicated than you know they need to be? And helping people identify that feeling, which is often frustration, and that's really the feeling, that's your signal that something is happening here that could be improved upon. And so when we take that approach, it tends to work a little better, and then we can start to categorize, well, what kind of waste is it? And then what types of approaches might you take to eliminate that sort of waste? So we do a lot of work just with the simple identification of wastes. Next slide, please. We also talk a lot about who is our customer at CDPH, and this is another word that sometimes people respond to with a little bit of hesitation when it's first introduced, because CDPH is not a business in the traditional sense. And so the idea that there's a customer and there's a transaction that should be occurring can be hard to relate to in this type of very service-oriented work. So we spend a lot of time with our teams talking about the different kinds of customers that we have. We have end customers who are all of us who live within the state of California who receive the benefit of a robust public health department. And then there are your internal customers, who is generally that's the next operator in the process, whoever's receiving your work, that is also a customer. So we do tend to front load the improvement work we do with a really robust conversation about, well, who is the real customer, who's the end customer, who's the next customer, and how can we design this process or this service to create value for that customer, and what is value. So we do have a lot of these kinds of theoretical conversations with teams as we're getting started, and it's starting to show a shift in the culture where people are starting to think about their work from this standpoint, which previously was not always the case. Next slide, please. We also talk quite a bit about this, or at least we try to have this conversation wherever it's relevant, which is as we're doing improvement work really anywhere on the vertical value streams or on the horizontal value streams, we'd like to ask the teams to think about what is the pace of demand, or as we would say in lean, what's your tact time? Because historically, the work that happens at CDPH is not viewed through this lens. There are a couple of lenses that the work's often not viewed through. One of them is this: do you know the pace of demand? How quickly would you need to move through the steps of this process in order to meet that pace of demand? Even if it's a theoretical number that you arrive at by calculating your tact time, or a number that may seem unattainable, and it may be unattainable at this point in time, but it's important to know what the tact time is and understand that concept, and that all of the work that we do in improvement and writing standard work and all these other tools we might try are all directed toward the endeavor of eventually meeting tact time or getting as close to tact time as you can. For those of you who don't know what takt time is, and you're listening to me talk about that and thinking, I don't understand what this lady's talking about. Takt time is a calculated number. It is not a measured number. As much as we measure time in lean, and we measure how long each process step takes, and how long's the waiting time, and how long's your cycle times and your lead times, and those are all important numbers to know. This is not a measured time. This is a calculated time, and you calculate it by knowing the amount of time that you have available to work on a process, and then divided by the demand for that process. So total time available versus the demand. And the demand is usually the volume, or how many requests you have for something, or how many things do you have to complete? What's the requirement for you to complete? How much time do you have? And then it becomes a math problem. This is now your takt time. In another forum, I would be happy to give you an example and go through a whole explanation of how to calculate takt time, because I love talking about it, but I don't want to take a lot of time on that right now. So if there's a forum later to discuss it, I'm happy to do that. So anyway, we spend a lot of time with teams just sort of orienting them to this idea, which is a revolutionary concept. Do you mean that there is actually a way to know how quickly we should do things? And in order to keep up and not have backlogs, which so many of the different areas in CDPH experience backlogs because they cannot make their takt time. Next slide, please. This is another area where we have a lot of conversation, theoretical conversation, interesting debate among teams regarding what is pull in a public health setting. As you know, in lean, we talk about pull systems being the thing you would try to work toward if you can't achieve flow. And then what was most often the truth and reality is we have push systems, right? We're just pushing work on to the next step in a process. We're done with it. Now you take it. And whereas in a pull system, there's a signal from that next step downstream that they're ready for more work and they pull the work toward them. That's the lean way. We're not really there yet at CDPH. It's very much a push system, where people do their work and then they just push it along to the very next step. And oftentimes our end customer has actually, this is one of the things that makes working at CDPH so interesting. They actually have the work pushed onto them too, because in some cases, the people of the state of California don't know what it is they need to be pulling for. It's CDPH's job to tell them and to educate them by pushing it out, because the average person walking around doesn't know about all of the different public health issues that are arising or that may arise or that we see on the horizon. So the relationship of push and pull in this work is really quite fascinating. Where we do try to keep it a little more contained and focused is just on the simple internal processes of things that we know we need to do administratively, and can there be pull for them in areas like contracts, like budgeting. Can we create pull in those processes within to make all of what we do flow more smoothly and better positioned possibly to someday meet our takt time? So that's just a sort of a theoretical conversation that we have, but we have it a lot. And it's a fun thing to chew on working at CDPH. Next slide, please. And then lastly, before I hand it over to Jonathan, we also focus a lot of time on the Gemba. And as you saw earlier when I talked about the True North Compass, the go and see element of the Toyota management system being such a key feature in understanding problems well. It's a key part of being a lean leader. It's a key part of understanding the burden of the worker. What are people really experiencing as opposed to what we think they are experiencing when they do their work? So we, of course, as lean practitioners, we want to go to the Gemba, but the Gemba is sometimes people's houses. A lot of folks who work at CDPH are still working from home. Some folks work in offices, but a lot of people work from home. And so we've been playing around with different ways of going to the Gemba in a virtual way, so we can observe how the work is done in that kind of setting. When we can go to district offices, or we can go to long-term care facilities, or we can go to an office, we do. And we're really encouraging leaders to do more and more of that so they can more clearly understand the problem at hand. Sometimes it's not possible. So we do things instead of screen sharing, getting on a Teams call with other people and just sort of talking through what they're doing, a lot of time observations and process observations as a result of that. So this is another lean leader behavior and a lean value that we're trying to imbue into the department, even though this challenge exists of the Gemba can be in any number of places, still such a key part of really understanding a problem and showing respect for people by seeing what they're actually challenged with doing all day long. So those are some of the key lean principles that we work with at CDPH. And with that, I will hand it back to Jonathan, where he's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of what we've been up to in the Lean Transformation Office, building out the lean arm of the organization.
Thank you, Bonnie. So some of these other concepts that we've been working to educate folks on and build capacity to support lean improvement. I'm going to discuss a few more here. So in public health, we're very good at approaching population health outcomes and studying a problem and using a scientific lens. We're not great at leveraging that same scientific thinking to improve processes. So this is a skill that we're working to build within CDPH. So the importance of going and seeing, going to Gemba, doing observations in partnership with CDPH staff, and determining ways to measure and visualize our processes. So we've been able to start doing a lot of virtual-based observations, things like time studies and motion studies, that have been focused on understanding lean time or the time with the process from a lean lens. So things like cycle time, wait times, lead time, and documenting what waste is present within a process directly with staff. This has also been really important when we're viewing our processes to see how this process, we might be able to look at it through a health equity lens and to figure out ways to improve the process so that we're improving and reducing health inequities. So we can ask the questions with our staff, like how is the lead time for our processes impacting certain populations within California? Are there inequities within cycle time for certain communities, for example? Are there opportunities to improve the process, to better integrate health equity, as well as others? So this is a new skill and capacity that we're working to build within CDPH. Next slide. So in addition to measuring process, we've also started to build out how we set targets around a lot of these different lean and quality improvement, different types of measures. So looking at time, looking at quality, health impact, health equity, process improvement, impact on customer, etc. Next slide. And in support of that, CDPH is also looking to set up and is currently setting up CDPH academic partnerships. So looking to partner with the or the University of California system and tapping into new areas such as health economics, implementation science, data and decision science, and figuring out ways as to how can we integrate those new disciplines as to how we measure our process and set targets for our improvement work. And this, I think, aligns great with the CDPH way of becoming the best at getting better. Next slide. And so these past few slides have shown a lot on some of these great lean concepts we've been working to instill within CDPH. And we've focused a lot of our presentation so far on the specific improvement work we've been doing. We're also looking to embed and build out the management side of our lean transformation. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with what a lean management system is, or what might be called a daily management system within your organization. It's somewhat akin to our operating system. So it supports visual management of the work, sustains continuous improvement, works on alignment, bidirectional accountability, reinforces and supports lean leadership behaviors. And as we said earlier, out of respect for people, a key part of the lean management system is coaching and developing of our workforce. Next slide. And so this is a great visual. And I think Bonnie had highlighted this early on. You can see our true north triangle up in the top right corner. But this is one of our visibility walls that supports our continuous improvement work and lean transformation work at CDPH. So this has all of our strategic A3s. It incorporates the element of linked checking. So using that communication and checking structure to track our work and track our problem solving, and to support the development of problem solving, but through coaching. And relies on visual management to show progress relative to our targets using data. So this is I think one of the more impressive things that we've been able to build out honestly, to support visual management, especially with a very remote-based workforce within CDPH. Next slide. And so some of the other components of our management system, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this when you're doing more focused improvement work. So doing things like a value stream mapping workshop or an improvement workshop, you go into it, you make these great improvements. And then after the workshop, you have this somewhat of a natural entropy to the improvement work. Things seem to fall off or are reprioritized or whatever it may be. So there, we use PDSA, so Plan, Do, Study, Act. We also use improvement kata and coaching kata, which are visualized here on the slide, to track and embed continuous improvement within all of our improvement work. So this is a core part of our lean management system that we're building across CDPH to track, sustain, and truly pursue continuous improvement. And as we say within CDPH, pursue perfection for our processes. Next slide. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of our current strategic improvement work, including our vertical value streams. We've talked a little bit about the concepts and methods that we've been using to drive improvement, but we also want to talk a little bit about how we're driving lean transformation as the lean transformation section within CDPH. So the lean transformation section, which is headed by Bonnie, and I'm a part of this section as well as many others, is responsible for driving this lean transformation. So this last section, we're going to take a quick peek under the hood of the lean transformation section's work as we're driving this lean transformation. Next slide. And so a core part of our CDPH's lean transformation and our team's work is to develop CDPH staff as lean thinkers, problem solvers, and leaders through education. And this shows our lean transformation model that we've aligned a lot of our education for CDPH staff to build that problem solving capacity and start to instill lean principles, management, and leadership. Next slide, please. And so by educating to those components in that house and using more coaching that's centered on the folks doing the current improvement work tied to our strategic A3s, and standing up a 2-day, 8-hour Lean 101 that's available to all CDPH staff, we're hoping to continue to make an impact on folks' awareness of lean concepts and methods and leadership principles, and build their capacity to basically bring this lean philosophy into their public health work. Next slide. Our lean transformation section has also started a lean community of practice to help broaden our reach across CDPH staff. So this is to essentially a community of practice to further develop folks who are interested in or currently participating in lean activities. And one of our first lean community of practice activities was a study group of the seminal lean text, The Toyota Way by Jeffrey Liker. We'll also be running future study groups that are going to be focused on creating a lean culture and humble inquiry, pictured here by Edgar Schein. We've also set up a monthly newsletter that we call the Lean Zine, which is a very catchy and fun name for our newsletter that shows ongoing and planned lean activities, articles, 1-point lessons on lean concepts, and shows and allows folks to actually link to ongoing trainings that we're hosting. Next slide. And then finally, we've also started to run twice monthly lean office hours. And this is, again, available to any staff across CDPH. Staff can bring problems, question, ideas to discuss with staff from our lean transformation section. So folks bring things like how to do an A3, how to break down a problem they're hoping to work on. They bring challenges or questions about lean culture or leadership and skills and behaviors, and are able to receive either one-on-one or small group coaching from our staff directly on this. And so all of these educational structures and forums that we've been building out are helping us build our lean engine as a lean transformation section. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it back to Bonnie to talk a little bit about culture and the Shingo assessment.
Thanks, Jonathan. We're almost to time, so I'm going to go a little more quickly here. Just letting you know that one of the things we have coming in the next quarter or so is to undergo a Shingo Insight assessment so that we can set a baseline for how we've done so far in establishing a lean culture and maturing in some of these other dimensions. And then based off of that baseline, we'll be able to set our next phase targets for how we can further drive the transformation and mature on these dimensions. So we are aligning ourselves again with Shingo. Next slide, please. Some lessons that we've learned in the year and a half or so that we've been at this. First, we must heal ourselves. Before we can really help the people of the state of California, we have to focus on healing from all of the trauma and the difficult experiences that the public health department itself has been through in the last couple of years. So that's been a really key thing to learn and focus on. We're also seeing the importance of an organized and structured lean leadership education, because we want to ask, with respect for people, ask the leaders to do things and to teach them and show them how to do them before they're expected to actually integrate that into their daily work. The advantage of educating teams instead of individuals. Lean 101 is something that people can take if they want to voluntarily, and we notice that then they are a bit abandoned in their home area because the rest of their team hasn't been educated with them in some cases. So we're looking at that too. Virtual environment changes. We've talked about some of these other things, as Jonathan mentioned, the importance of measuring process, not just outcomes, which is a new habit that we're trying to build, and then how important it is to have comprehensive communications. Next slide, please. I think do we have one more? Can you pass this one to the actual list? There we go. Thank you so much, Talia. So I just want to, before we run out of time, I want to give a big thank you to the people who are mentioned on this slide. These are some of the most important leaders at CDPH. Dr. Aragon, first and foremost, this was really his idea to bring lean to CDPH. And then Christine Shador, who is his assistant director. She's the executive sponsor for a lot of this lean work. And then the other leaders on this slide, Susan Finelli, she's the leader over workforce development. Dr. Radhakrishna, who runs the health equity area, also a very important leader. And Julie Nagasaco, Julia Aragon, who run the OPP, and Christina Rivero, who's over HRD. Without them, we wouldn't be getting any of this done. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Talia.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We do have time for a quick question. What activity do you do to heal? You've talked a lot about healing in this presentation. Super important. What do you do to heal?
Well, organizationally, I'll answer and say that there were a whole series of workshops that were offered throughout CDPH to anyone who was interested, which were facilitated by external contractors who were brought in, who were trained in community healing, in diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And they had the opportunity to facilitate meetings over the course of the entire year with all members of CDPH to allow people to talk about the trauma that they'd experienced, the discrimination that they still feel happens, different frustrations and emotions that they have around working at CDPH and what they see in their day-to-day. So the department put a lot of energy behind that to give people an opportunity to talk about it and gain some skills on how to work through those emotions. The Lean Transformation Office was not necessarily a part of those, but we were invited to participate if we wanted to.
That's awesome. Another one, when you identify inequities, what do you do to address them?
Oh, that's a tough question. I guess it would depend on where they're happening and what the nature of the inequity is. One of the inequities that we've noticed first is that the people who work within CDPH do not demographically reflect the people who live in the state of California, and in specific, those in leadership, management, high-level executive positions, demographically do not reflect the demographics of the state of California. So there's a lot of effort being put in to look at what are the recruiting practices, how are applicants for jobs screened, what are the prerequisites required, and are those in some way discriminatory? Is there a system in place that it doesn't allow for people who of certain demographic groups to even be considered for jobs? And is that something that we can measure and improve upon? So I know there's a lot of activity happening around that one specifically.
And I'll
Wonderful.
just say,
Oh.
sorry, I'll just say briefly that it also informs how we select and prioritize our improvement work, and how we scope our improvement efforts essentially too. For example, like I've been working with the contracts group within CDPH, and we've looked at like they do many different types of contracts, from competitive to non-competitive to just with local health departments to with interagencies within California. And it's really thinking about how we use data to inform, prioritize, and scope our improvement efforts to align with improving upon health inequities, essentially. So how can we do improvement work scope that scope down to the level of like, this will have a direct impact on communities of California, versus just focusing on like a internal facing contracts process.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer, Bonnie, and that addition, Jonathan. Thank you both for that presentation. And thank you to our interpreters, Kelly and Bridget. Thank you for everyone who attended. Almost done with our conference. And we just want to invite you to take our survey at the end and help us to continuously improve. We appreciate your feedback. If you are enjoying the conversation and you would like to continue this conversation on lean and continuous improvement, please look to our results.wa.gov website. You can register for our monthly community of practice. And those are pretty awesome. We also have a monthly public performance review that we do with the governor, where we talk about all the improvements we're making across the state that have to do with working towards his top 5 priorities. Other than that, if you missed any sessions, you want to rewatch sessions, you want to go look at materials that have been posted, please go visit our site, results.wa.gov. And we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Bonnie and Jonathan. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.